Hi folks, my name is Lisa of Sew Lisa Lamb, and today I want to share with you my favourite tips and tricks on how to sew zip pockets into PU fabric. So when I say zip pockets, I mean pockets that look like this. So here I have one of my latest bag designs. This is called the Ravello bag, and it just happens to be made in this rather lovely woven effect PU fabric. And this is the bag front, and at the bag back we have a rather snazzy looking zip pocket. I've just added a little bit of a tie to the zip pull there. So many of you would have probably sewn a pocket that looks just like this into the lining of your bags, and usually the lining of your bags is made from a woven fabric, quite often quilt weight fabric actually. So as you can see, the two pockets, the lining pocket and the pocket on the outside that is PU, look exactly the same. But what I will say is, whilst the process to build the zip pocket is the same in woven and PU fabric, there are two things that make sewing pockets into PU fabric a little bit more tricky, and they are: you can't pin PU fabric, because when you make holes in the PU fabric, those holes are permanent, and you certainly can't be ironing PU fabric. So today I'm going to show you some tips and tricks for working around those two tricky issues. So let's talk about the tools that you'll need. You won't need any fancy tools, but these tools that you will use, I highly recommend getting hold of. So the first is some tape. I have a big bowl, noodles on the brain, as you may, if you know me, I am a noodle head. You have a big roll of duct tape. Now I really like duct tape because it's super sticky. It's nice and wide. You can use parcel tape as well, as long as it's good quality parcel tape. What we really need to worry about is that it's nice and wide and super sticky. You'll also need some standard sticky tape as well, so any household sticky tape will do. You will also need a pair of sharp scissors, some double-sided quilters washable tape. So you can't get just any old double-sided tape from the stationers. You need to get what is called double-sided quilters washable tape, and it needs to be 1/4 of an inch wide. All bag makers go through this like water. Even if you're only going to make 2 bags in your life, you will definitely find this stuff useful. Even if you're a dressmaker, you'll find this stuff useful. So very highly recommended for your toolbox. You'll also need a seam roller. You can get, so this one's by Clover, but you can get non-branded ones which are more inexpensive. A very useful thing to have. Looks innocuous, looks boring, even looks like it won't do the job, but I promise you this is one of my favourite sewing tools. So that is a seam roller, and you're going to be using that in place of an iron. You'll also need a seam ripper, and you'll need some sewing clips. Now, I'm sure many of you are quite used to sewing clips by now, but the sewing clips that we're going to be using today are long, and I believe they're called quilter sewing clips. But if that search doesn't work in your internet browser, just try looking for long sewing clips. They're super useful. I mean, I'm not a quilter by trade, I'm a bag maker, hopefully you'll know that by now. So if you haven't bought them before and you want to make a few bags in your lifetime, a pack of 10 will serve you very well indeed. So today I'm going to be using about 5. I'm going to be using 5 quilters clips for today's task. You will also need a zip. So I'm just using an all-purpose nylon zip, and as you can see, I've already gone ahead and I've put the double-sided washable tape on the long edges of the right side of the zip. And lastly, you'll need your ruler. And for my fabric pieces, I've got my pocket fabric, which is the woven stuff, and you'll see that I've already drawn the zip rectangle, which is always the rectangle with a line in the center that ends with arrowheads at both sides. I'm not really going to emphasize the the size of the rectangle, because that's all dependent on the zip that you want to make, and it'll probably be mentioned in your pattern. I will say though that I like to make my zip rectangle holes when using an all-purpose zip. I always like to make them 1.5 centimeters tall, but as I say, the width is completely dependent on how wide you're making your pocket. And I've also got my PU fabric. So today this piece of PU fabric is just going to resemble my bag front or bag back. So that's what I'll be using. So this is my pretendy bag body piece. Okay, let's get started. Right, so I'll move the camera down and to face the table. Oh. There we go. Okay, right, so first thing we need to do is we need to place our fabrics right sides together. So I know that this lining fabric is same color on both sides, but the lining fabric needs to be attached to the PU fabric right sides together. And so this, let's just say for argument's sake, this is the top edge of my bag, this is the top edge of my pocket. I'm going to make sure that the pocket lining piece is central on the vertical plane, and I want to make sure that I put my pocket piece a certain length down from the pocket top edge. I'm not really going to say what. For me, it's usually 3 centimeters, but yeah, you don't really need to worry about that measurement right now, because it'll be mentioned in your pattern how far down you need to put your pocket lining fabric down from the top edge. So I'm just using my ruler to make sure that it's 3 centimeters tall here and 3 centimeters tall here, and I'm happy that this fabric is central on the vertical plane. Now, so it's this stage in the pocket making, we would usually be using our pins. So if let's just say we were working with woven fabric for the bag outer and the bag pocket, we would usually use pins to attach this fabric temporarily to the bag body. But as we're working with PU, we can't do that. So how are we going to stick this fabric to the PU temporarily? So what we're going to do first is we're going to go in with our normal household sticky tape, and we're just going to stick the long edges of the pocket fabric to the PU like that. Doesn't need to be pretty, as long as we've got enough tape in there to hold the woven fabric in place, that's absolutely fine. Right, so I'm quite satisfied that that's not going to move. And now this is where the long sewing clips come in handy. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get the top edge of the PU fabric, and I'm going to roll it over. I'm going to roll it over the top edge of the woven fabric, like so. And it doesn't matter if you crease it or bend it, because as we know, those creases in the PU fabric, they will relax out and you won't see them after you've taken off the sewing clips. And the lovely thing about the long sewing clips is not only are they longer, the spring is stronger too. So you can be quite confident that the PU is going to grip onto the outer woven fabric, and everything is going to stay in place for when you do that all-important sewing. And feel free, if you want to, use more than 5 sewing clips. I mean, obviously, if you're working with a very, very long travel bag and you're working with a very, very wide pocket, then you will need more sewing clips. Just use as many as you need so that you feel that this piece of fabric is securely held onto the PU fabric long enough for you to sew this rectangular hole, because that's the next stage in making the pocket. So as you can see, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of work to the machine, and I'm going to stitch around this rectangular hole, because that's what we always do when we sew our zip pockets. I'm going to be sewing, because I'm working with PU, we need to elongate our stitches. We don't do normal woven stitch length, which standard is 2.4 to 2.5. Because we're working with PU, we want to elongate our stitch to 3. So I like a stitch length of 3, and I also will be using a universal size 90 needle. If your PU is particularly thick, I suggest a size 100 universal needle. You don't need to use jeans needles or leather needles for working with PU. Universal needles are not only perfect for PU, they're also more inexpensive. Okay, right, so I've already got my machine ready. The stitch length is already set to 3, and I am going to quickly sew around the rectangle. I'm not too great with the video editing things, and my lovely daughter is at school right now, so I can't ask her to do it for me, because you know how great the kids are with technology, rest leaving us adults flailing behind looking like, well, Luddites. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly sew around the rectangle now. I will say, because I'm sewing PU to woven fabric, it is okay to sew securing stitches at the start and end of the stitches, because I'm sure you will have been told in the past that you're not meant to sew securing stitches in PU, because you might leave too many perforations. But I'm sewing the PU to woven fabric together, which means that there is more stability for the PU. So 3 securing stitches at the start and end is just fine. I'm sewing quite quickly because I'm very confident with sewing with PU by now. It is pretty much my favourite bag making fabric. It's durable, it's waterproof, and nowadays comes in a myriad of beautiful textures and lovely pretty designs. So, you know, you have the best of both worlds really. There'll always be a place in my heart for quite weight fabric, but for me as a bag maker, I think PU is pretty hard to beat. Feel free to slow your stitches down. It's not a race. You do what you need to do to feel comfortable with your sewing. As I get to the end of my stitch line, I always like to hand crank. I've been sewing for many years, but you know, when bag making, especially with PU, I do loads of hand cranking, because obviously if you overshoot when you're sewing with woven fabric, that's fine. You can just reverse the needle, go back to where you were. But if you've oversewn your stitch line in PU, you've made holes, and those holes are permanent. So yeah, don't worry about hand cranking when you're making your bag. You'll probably find that you'll end up doing that a lot, and that's fine. Okay, so I'm at the end of my stitch line. I'm just going to sew 3 securing stitches in reverse, and then I am ready to take my work off the machine. Let's move you to one side, and then you can now see what I have done. I can safely remove the long sewing clips from the top edge of the bag, and I'm just going to trim these threads here, front and back. And now I can safely remove the sellotape at the sides of the pocket fabric. Be careful when you remove the tape, because obviously you don't want to fray the raw edges to shreds. Okay, just pop that on the table there. Oops, it's a little bit of a fray. Going a little bit too fast, because I'm not too brilliant at doing those speedy up boring bits in videos. I mean, I know part of me should learn. I know part of me should learn how to do video editing, but seriously, whilst I'm learning video editing, then I'm not designing, then I'm not sewing. And those are the bits that I really enjoy doing and are fun. Okay, so as we know, when making a zip pocket, the next stage is we need to cut along this line and then cut along the arrowheads. So I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to stick my seam ripper into the central area of the line and then make myself a nice starter cut. Then go in with my scissors and then cut, cut, cut. And then when you cut into your arrowheads and you cut into the corners, you're going to cut into the corner close to the corner seam, but obviously do not cut into those corner stitches or there will be tears and or swearing, and we don't want that. And that's that side. And that arrowhead done. Okay, right, so now we're working with PU. The next PU conundrum is just about to be solved. Okay, so ordinarily what we would do when sewing zip pocket into woven fabric is we would be aiming to get a very nice crisp seamed hole for us to attach our zip to. But yes, we're working with PU fabric, so we can't use a lovely hot steamy iron and we can't use any pins again. So how are we going to get a lovely crisp zip hole? So firstly, what we're going to do is going to get our seam roller. And this is easy, obviously, because we're just going to flatten our woven fabric just to get things going, really, just to start the process. And then we're going to feed this fabric into the wrong side of our bag. So we just post it through the letterbox, as you've probably done before. Now, as you can appreciate, because it's PU, this seam is just not gonna want to bend for you. You'll bend it and it will spring back. That's to be expected. So this is where we are going to use our seam roller. We're going to use our seam roller to begin the creasing process, but the seam roller is not going to work just by itself because it's PU. So we'll mush the fibres a bit by using the seam roller just to encourage it. Just to encourage the PU to crease. But as I say before, it won't work. It won't work in of itself, just on its own. You're going to need something else to keep that PU fabric bent down nice and folded flat. But we're just going to start the process, just going to warm things up a bit, so to speak, with the seam roller, and then fold that fabric through, turn everything round to the other side, and working with one edge at a time. So you're working it with the top edge. We'll deal with this bit in a moment. We'll deal with this bit. The top part of the pocket first. Okay, so it feels very, it feels very stubborn at the moment. It feels like it's not going to do what it's told. But remember, who's the boss? You're the boss. You are the boss. So we're going to use our tape to make this fold lie down. The first thing we do is we're going to get the top edge of this fabric, of the pocket fabric, and fold it into the wrong side. Doesn't really matter how much. I think 1 centimetre is probably ideal, actually. 1 centimetre doesn't need to be perfect all around, but all we're doing is we're concealing the pocket top raw edge. That's all we want to do, like so. And we're going to pull the fabric up. So do you notice when I pull the top edge of the fabric up, it makes that crease. It makes the crease nice and sharp because I'm pulling the cotton fabric under tension, which is forcing the PU beneath to bend and lie flat. Now what we need to do is to, as you might have guessed, get your lovely strong sticky tape. And this is why I love duct tape, is because it's flipping sticky. This is ideal. We're going to just tape this folded edge to the wrong side of the PU, but you must be careful not to cover too much of the zip hole edge, because we're going to be sticking our zip there. So I would say, position wise, put your sticky tape about 1/2 centimetre in, making sure that that cotton fabric is held firmly under tension, and then press that down. You might see that I've bent a little corner of my duct tape down so that I can use that easily to peel it away later. So it's a good idea, obviously, to have these pieces pre-cut so that you're ready to use them. And again, you see, I'm pulling the cotton fabric under tension. I'm firmly pulling it away from the zip hole, and that is making the PU fabric underneath stay nicely folded and crisp, which is exactly what you want. Maybe I'll put another piece there just to make sure. So it doesn't need to look pretty, it's just for the purposes of keeping this fabric away from the zip hole. Now to deal with this edge. Actually, look, if you see on the right side, the PU is so springy, so springy, it's made the cotton fabric spring back. But no, we're not going to stand for that, because we're the boss. Because I've used more duct tape than I thought I was going to, I'm just going to cut another piece now, because I don't want to have to stop and cut some tape whilst I'm getting my bottom pocket layer in position. So duct tape is pretty sticky stuff, and it leaves just like this gross residue on your scissors. So I've got a pair of cheapy scissors just for this very purpose, and then I use sticky stuff to get rid of the gunk on my blades every week or so. Okay, right, so now with the bottom edge, we're going to pretty much treat it in the same way as we did the top edge. So we bend the PU down, so this is how it's looking on the right side. We bend that PU down, and we just get things rolling. We just get the process going by flattening that seam down with the seam roller. Just double check to see how that looks on the right side. And then just use as much pressure as you can muster. It really, I mean, whilst it doesn't hold the PU, whilst this roller won't make the PU sit flat by itself, it certainly helps proceedings greatly. Okay, right, now to get the bottom part of the pocket under control, we're just going to roll it up. Again, doesn't need to be pretty. We just want to roll it up so that we can expose some of the wrong side PU. And I'm just going to stick a piece of tape here so that this roll doesn't come away, doesn't flop down whilst I'm doing sewing, and I'm making sure that there's a enough of a gap for me to stick my zip there later on. And as you can see here, I'm pulling the cotton fabric away from the zip hole, so that I'm going to end up with a lovely crisp rectangular hole for me to stick my stick my zip to and stitch my zip to. So don't be, don't be shy about being firm, because that is what bosses do. Bosses are firm. Okay, right, so I'll just get myself a bit of tape there, and I'm going to stick it. And yeah, that looks good. I mean, just if you want, you can turn everything down. Give that fabric, give that woven fabric a bit of a pull down, just to make sure that, because obviously we don't want the PU to spring back when we're at the sewing machine. That's the last thing that we want. And we want to make sure that we end up with that lovely crisp rectangular sew hole. Now as for the sides, you can use more duct tape if you want to. It might be an idea, actually. Shall I cut some more? Yes, I should. Just use a couple of smaller pieces for the zip hole short edges, short edge sides. As I said before, if you don't have duct tape, that is fine, but you can use parcel tape, but just make sure that it's good quality stuff, because some parcel tapes are pretty flimsy and not that sticky. And what you need is, you really need the stickiness. Now remember, because this tape is very sticky, don't stick it to don't let the raw edges of your fabric come into contact with the tape, or that could result in horrible fraying. We do not want that. Okay, so as you can see here, I'm getting the short edges. I'm just rolling them under so that when I stick the tape onto the fabric, it won't fray when I remove it later on. There you go. There, that does look very Blue Peter, doesn't it? But this is what we've needed to do in place of using pins and an iron, because it is, to sew a beautiful pocket onto any fabric, it's absolutely integral that you get this rectangular zip hole nice and crisp. And that's what it is. There's no, as I look at it now, there is no lining fabric peeking through that PU, which is exactly what we want. And we're now ready to get our zip. I've already, as I said before, I've already put quilter's washable tape on. I'm now going to remove the backings and place the rectangular zip hole onto the zip. Now, it does not matter how many of these zip pockets you've made in your life. There is always going to be an amount of adjusting and lifting up and moving the zip teeth and taping and untaping needed to make sure that your zip is nicely central in the zip hole. So it is no measure of expertise, confidence or skill or anything if you are going to take ages just to get that zip perfectly central, because it's such a visible part of your bag, especially if the zip pocket is on the outside. So if your zip is wiggly in the middle, that is just going to annoy you a little bit all of the time. So if we take our time now just to arrange everything beautifully, you'll thank yourself a little bit every day in the future. Though, because I'm making this video and you don't want to see me doing loads of arranging for like 10 years, I'm just going to get a general approximation of something that looks pretty central, but actually, to my eyes, in a real life situation, I'd probably spend another 5 to 10 minutes just getting everything perfectly central, because as you can imagine, PU fabric is a little bit more lively, shall we say, than woven fabric. So, you know, it kind of wants to spring up and misbehave itself. But honestly, if you take the time, it will fold to your command. There. Now, whilst that to me isn't 100% perfect, I'd say it's 85% there, okay? So, considering we haven't been able to use an iron, we haven't been able to use pins, this is still looking really rather nice. Okay, so I'm going to take this to the machine now, and what I do now is I'm going to sew around the zip hole with a 1/8 of an inch seam, and because I'm now top stitching, I'm going to elongate my stitch even further to 3.5. I'm still using the same size needle, still using quality all-purpose thread. Now, because I'm making a video, I'm going to be reasonably quick. Before I turn everything over, I'm just making sure that I'm not going to sew through anything controversial that I don't want to sew to. I mean, it does look like a dog's dinner at the back, but don't worry, it'll all be fine. Promise you, it'll all be okay. I'm just going to, I'll be using a brightish colour thread so that you can see my stitches, and hopefully that you'll agree we have what looks like a quite handsome and even looking zip pocket in this PU fabric. That's just me adjusting to 3.5 there. Whoops. If at any point, whilst you're stitching the pocket, and you notice a bit of the lining fabric is peeking out, there's absolutely nothing wrong with making sure your needle is in your work, and then lifting up the machine foot, and then just getting it to, just tucking that lining fabric back inside. But because I've used a lot of duct tape on the pocket lining fabric, I'm finding that there's barely any peeking out, and things are looking pretty neat. That's the thing, the longer you take with preparation, though that bit can be kind of boring sometimes, it makes the construction actually far more easy, which is what you want in the end. Looking nice. And remember, because I'm sewing into woven fabric this time, I can do my securing stitches quite safely in the PU. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. It's looking rather nice, folks. Okay, right, just trim off my threads, bring that to the camera, look. So, even for a rush job, that's not bad. So if you look at this zip, you can see there's no lining fabric peeking out. That is this, when there's lining fabric peeking out of a zip pocket, that is when you know that you weren't able to get a crisp rectangular seam for your zip hole. That's the big giveaway. So now on the back, we can safely remove all of this horrific looking duct tape. And because the fabric edges of the woven pocket were folded in, nothing's fraying. The PU fabric itself is perfectly unharmed. And actually, if you're particularly thrifty, because no, it's a good thing to be. There's nothing stopping you from saving these duct tape pieces for another time. Not least because they're so unpleasant to cut. Right. Almost there, almost there, almost there. Okay, so that's the wrong side of our pocket. I'm just going to unroll the top edge and unroll the side edge. And now all that's left to do is to stitch this free bit of fabric onto the other half of the pocket. You can actually, now because you're just going to be sewing on woven fabric, you can safely use pins. You can safely use pins on the woven fabric. So now we're at this part of the video. You can pretty much stop watching here, because this step is it's standard in sewing, when sewing zip pockets to woven fabric as well. All I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch from here, along here, and along here. So I'll quickly do that now, and then we will recap. But when you reach the short edge, you're going to make sure, so just, I need to emphasize, when you're doing this bit of sewing, so you can go back to your standard stitch length of 2.4, 2.5, because we're just sewing with quilt weight fabric. When you're doing this part of the sewing, make sure that you do not sew through the bag fabric at all. So you do what you need to do to roll the springy PU fabric out of the way, so that it does not. Do you know what? I've run out of bobbin fabric. This is very annoying. This is very annoying. Right, I'm not going to rethread. I'm not going to rethread. But I'm not going to rethread. I'm just going to try and get you to imagine, as I do with a lot of my demos. You poor viewers, you're always imagining things for me, because things don't always quite go to plan. But you know what? That's life for you. That's real life for you. We like to keep it real here at So Lisa Lamb. Okay, so what I would have done, had my bobbin thread not run out, is I would have stitched along here, and then stitched along the top, and then stitch along the side, and then that would have been my pocket completed. You see? Ta-da-da! So I wanted to make this video because I want people to feel comfortable with zips, because they are so inexpensive, they're so effective, but I appreciate that PU fabric might be new to you, or it might not be that new to you, but you haven't sewn a zip pocket into PU fabric before. And I just wanted to show you, actually, it's not hard. It's just finding ways of getting that woven fabric stuck to your PU fabric without using needles, and finding ways to get that PU fabric bent down so that you can make a crisp rectangular zip hole. So after this video, I hope you feel a lot more confident in being able to do those two things, and that you can make lovely zip pockets in PU that look like this and look like this, because I really, not only do they look snaz, they're so useful, and who doesn't need more pockets? Anyway, thanks for watching. It was a bit longer than I hoped for, but I hope you found it really useful, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye.